Hello, I'm Ram, and this is the unbelievable story of how I joined and dropped out of WhatsApp University after my master's. Do you know that feeling when you complete a rather tough game? How once you're finished with it, you feel your life is meaningless, that there's nothing left to do? I underwent something similar back in 2017 when I walked out of the conference room after presenting my dissertation. The directorate said, "Okay, Ram, I'll approve your project." My joy knew no bounds, but when I headed home, the feeling hit me. Facebook was my first resort those days. I logged in. I saw something strange. I studied in a school in a remote location in the district of Junagadh. My school was the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan's version of the Kendriya Vidyalaya, where people of all religions, all languages, all cultures, and all economic backgrounds from across India could be seen. A friend of mine was the son of a farmer. He wasn't very studious. Every time anybody asked him why he didn't try harder, he would say, "Well, what does it matter? I plan to be a farmer. If at all I decide to study further, it would be agricultural sciences. That's a Bachelor of Science, it doesn't need a high score." Sure enough, he studied agricultural sciences. The last I'd spoken to him was in 2010 when he'd started farming. His father had told me that he had sort of renewed their yields. I was happy for him. 7 years later, what I saw on Facebook was him all dressed up at a jewelry store opening. He'd lost some weight, in a good way, but hadn't managed to get rid of his paunch. I saw everyone congratulating him. I called him up and asked what the deal was. He said, "Tu mil main batata hu." It's a story too long for a phone call. Fair enough. I booked a ticket to Jaipur. Why he had left Junagadh was part of the long story. He'd sent over his car to pick me up. It was a brand new Fortuner. This guy had grown big. After pleasantries and dinner, we sat down in his courtyard to chat about life. That's the custom, right? That's when he told me the story. While studying, he had started working on some research. The subject was, why is the cow's milk yellowish in color? I was intrigued. This was a question that had haunted me for long. Turns out there's a blood vessel in the cow's hump which produces gold under the influence of, direct sunlight. This gold in turn gets added to the milk, which then gets its color. After postulating this, my friend and his research buddies started finding a way to extract this gold. In a couple of years, they had found a way to carry out this complex extraction. He had some 20 cows in his house by this time. You do the math on how he owns a jewelry store. I was done studying for the sake of studying. It was time I converted my learnings into something tangible. Being an engineer, especially an IT engineer, doesn't help much in the second decade of this century. I asked him which university he studied in. He handed me a brochure. I asked him what it meant by "bring this back when it has turned blue." He asked me to make copies of it and take it to this address. I laughed. He gave me a weird look. So I changed the subject. I asked, "What about the fees and all?" He said, "Nothing." "Oh, I know what you mean." He said, "Nope, no donation, no capitation, no nothing." I asked, "What about cutoff?" He shook his head and said, "Not even minimum IQ. Do you remember Pappu? Even he's with the university. Of course, he spends most of his time at the detention center." I was like, "What's that?" They call it Twitter. He's there all the time. Last I heard, he had set up his office there. I came home and told my father about it. We made copies of the brochure and gave them to 4 groups. And the brochure turned blue. Even we were shocked. We felt there was some credibility in all of this. The next morning, we flew to New Delhi. We showed the brochure at the office. They asked us for my details. We gave them the details. They filled up a form and asked, "Do you have a notice board?" I didn't, so I nodded. He nodded. 33,000 rupees, please. I asked, "For a year?" He said, "Nope, it's a one-time fee." For PhD. I literally could not believe it. The man adjusted his specs, looked up and said, "You name it. This is valid for 5 years. It can extend. It all depends on how you do what you do." We paid, collected the receipt, and walked out of the office. My father looked at the receipt and gave it to me, quite surprised. He said, "I worked in a university for 5 years, at the Vice Chancellor's office. I've never seen a notice board so expensive." The man with specs walked up to us and said, "Well, sir, the system is a little different here. Here the notice board is the blackboard. Every student gets a personal notice board. Go to that stall and show this receipt. They'll give it to you." And this is what I got. Back home, everyone in my family was happy that I'd found myself for something. They asked me about what I'd enrolled for. I did not have much of an answer. That made them uncomfortable. So I had to tell them about the WU model. I asked them, in all honesty, what made you not study when you were in school? There were a few things. First, heavy books that ran to thousands of words. Dry subjects and drier chapters such as Who Killed Bahadur Shah Zafar or Why is Sodium Lauryl Sulfate an ideal choice for commercial cosmetic detergent? I mean, who cares? Confusing, unrelatable topics like the difference between isotopes and isomers. Intimidation in class, teachers picking the guy who they are sure cannot answer a question, asking them the question, and then punishing them for not answering. And then you have loads and loads of homework, exams at the end of the year, all of that. WU handled these things differently. WU understood a few things. First, students do not like to read much. I think nobody does. Can you swallow plain oats? No. Masala must be added to it along with, cooking it to make processing simpler. Not everyone is in the mood to study 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. Studying should really be on demand. It's also such a waste to limit studying to 180 days a year. And finally, students do not like to sit in the class or come to the class only to study. That made WU introduce its own model of teaching and learning. All information should be in condensed form. Nothing should be more than a page. Enter notice board. You cannot pin multiple pages and expect people to read, can you? Students should not be made to carry textbooks, especially the heavy ones. Notice board is portable. Expecting intelligence on part of the student is unfair. It's the university's job to kindle the intelligence. So, there's no re-verification. Everything should be 100% true. Material should be available to students anytime, anywhere. So, each student should have their own notice board. Exams should be conducted only for those who are super ambitious. Others should be, free to receive all the content, store them in their head, or use them in their lives, whatever they feel like. And finally, over time, the university must partner with all premier institutes in the world to, deliver a high-quality curriculum, verify the curriculum, award the best, and announce them to the world. This is the WU Manifesto. Crisp and clear, like Turture and Shrite. These are the rules that WU lives by every day, and these are things that cannot be changed. Attempting to change these things is a cardinal offense that could lead you to death beyond redemption, whatever that means. WhatsApp circulars are circular in nature. It's the university's way of saying that they understand us, that we tend to forget, and it's okay to. Revisions happen every now and then. The university believes in a holistic approach towards learning. It doesn't restrict you to one subject, but whatever subjects are presented in their entirety. Now, condensation is the key to all curriculum at WU. Everything goes through a 7-stage condensation process. It starts with picking a book. The heavier it is, the better. Pick a passage, whichever seems like it could spark emotions. Emotions are how humans connect. They're important. Remove all context from the passage. Context is unnecessary baggage. Paraphrase a passage. Might as well. What other work are you doing anyway? Change active voice to passive makes you sound pompous and awesome. Remove all doubt. Make the content assertive. If you have doubts, there's a way to handle it. I'll tell you how in a moment. And finally, misattribute the content or condense it further. Optionally, add this condensed content out of context anywhere, like ketchup. Here's a sample of how it's done. Pick a book like, say, The Discovery of India and condense it to this. Look how apt it is for the notice board or for the echo chamber. Speaking of echo chambers, facts should not be doubted. If you want more confirmation bias, throw these facts in echo chambers. These could have your friends, family, or that random person who sat next to you in the bus and tried to read your circulars. The rest, as they say, is history. But long story short, when I was with the university, I helped a hospital with oxygen supply using animal waste. I helped my rich friends with all the cash they had in GPS tag notes. I worked on getting a rain cloud generator. Even Big B supported me on this one. I helped with the technology to track boats from within a statue, and when too many people started to complain, I worked on the same statue to enable it to produce enough electricity to power Mumbai. I underwent a crash course in economics and did a superb analysis about buying cars. I stopped our government from going to war over petty things like the Kohinoor diamond. I spoke to the likes of Macaulay, Mark Twain, Einstein, Tagore, and even Maharshi Kashyap. I set up a plastic research facility within my kitchen and researched plastic rice, plastic twisty snacks, plastic potato chips, and all of that stuff. My sister and I even made plastic bags out of cabbage when we went vegetable shopping one day. You know, regular plastic bags are banned in South Bangalore, and we had forgotten to take our bags along. So we just bought an extra cabbage and made plastic bags out of them. The list is endless. I realized how the university enhanced our lives. One day, I got a call from the university when I was in the library working on my thesis. I was already having a tough day because whatever any of the books said were all opposite of what I'd studied at the university, and I was feeling dizzy. I answered the call anyway because, I'm a nice guy, and went to the block in the chamber that they'd asked me to go to. An extremely well-groomed old man sat at the desk in the room. He smiled at me when I entered. I smiled back. On his desk, I saw the thesis that my friend had submitted. The sheet on top read 0, but also selected. I looked at the old man and he said, "Beta-carotene. That's what gives the milk the color in your world. Have a seat." After I sat down, he said, "You see that helmet-like thing hovering over your head? Wear it and relax." I was like, "What is it?" It's a brain scanner. Don't worry too much about it." A minute passed since he had started looking at the visor-like display. He nodded. "That should be enough." "Ram, you don't belong in this world. I don't know how you entered, but we've been watching what you read. And also, there's an upper limit on IQ here, and yours is beyond the acceptable limit. I'm afraid you'll need to leave before you become a danger to the institute and spoil the other students. We don't tolerate even one bad apple." My world started to crash. I thought, am I being rusticated? He said, "You see, here, confirmation bias reigns supreme. What you think are facts in your real world have no place here. Studies indicate that there are leakages leading to extensive exchange of people both ways. We're working on finding them. Have you noticed the increased seriousness, anger, hatred, and all of that in your world? That's because of this leakage. Anyway, that's our problem. You can leave through that door." I wouldn't move. So he dragged me to the door, opened it, and pushed me out. I fell into a dark room. As soon as I moved a little, the sensors turned on the lights. I took a moment to reorient myself. Then I realized that this was the same room where I'd given the presentation for my dissertation. I looked at the door through which I'd fallen. It was the same that I'd walked out of that day, a few years ago. A wormhole of sorts. A board above read, "Failed, enter." The projector came on, and I saw the director in the image. He chuckled and said, Why were you in such a hurry to leave? I was about to tell you that you were going through the wrong door. I looked sideways, and there it was, the other door, the door that said exit. The display went off as I approached the door. I was confused, and I called my friend. He was still in Junagadh. He was still a farmer, and studying for the sake of knowledge was still great. 2 days later, I met him. After dinner, we sat in his courtyard on his tractor, looking at the stars, enjoying the breeze, smelling the manure in the moist soil, listening to the crickets sing. I closed my eyes, taking in the entire ambience, and I decided to look for fellow dropouts like me. So, if you are a dropout from the WhatsApp University, give me a shout out. It'd be nice to connect.